Hello and welcome to the Rethinker video blog, a place where we look at issues in our culture and in Scripture from a strategic Christian perspective. Today I want to talk about the church. And a lot of times when we talk about the church, we tend to focus on the theologies of the church or the denomination of the church. And a lot of times what we see in our culture today is that we're seeing a lot of people just leave the church, unfortunately. People in mass just leaving the church. And we have books like Unchristian, and we have books like Revolution by George Barna, which is talking about how many people no longer are engaged in an institutional building of the church. And I think we can kind of look at a couple reasons why. But today we're going to talk about three attitudes of the church, and that is the exclusive church, the inclusive church, and the extending church. So let's talk about the first one first, the exclusive church. You know, there are a lot of churches out there where if you don't believe what they do, act the way they do, subscribe to the same tenets that they do, you're really not part of the church. And in many cases, or accepted to that church. And in many cases, really what we do, however unintentionally, is we strip people of their image of God heritage. We don't recognize that regardless of what somebody believes, how somebody acts, what their political stance is, we are all made in the image of God first and foremost. And the exclusive church doesn't really recognize that. So if you aren't part of their system, if you're not part of their beliefs, then you're really not accepted. And a lot of these churches are very elitist. They are, and a lot of times it becomes very frustrating because people who maybe they have an issue that they're struggling with, well, if it doesn't match up with the church, they're sort of either kicked out or shunned or looked upon in a bad way, and a lot of people leave because of that. But then the next church, I think, is where we see people leave more than even the exclusive church, and that's the inclusive church. Now, the inclusive church is basically, they accept you, they want you to be part of that church, but you really have to make the effort to be part of it. So whether it's joining the new members class or joining a discipleship group or whatever it is, as long as you are making the effort in that church, then there's a relationship, then there's an opportunity for you. But as soon as there's nothing that you provide to that church, then you really, sometimes in many cases, are seen kind of again from that outsider situation. They don't have as much time for you as they do for the ones that are really participating in the church itself. And a lot of times what happens is these are people who might get sick for a couple weeks and nobody comes and visits them because there's no incentive to do so. You know, or they're gone from the church for 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and nobody calls to check up on them because they're not there. It's not as important. And a lot of people get very disillusioned from this type of church because they want to be cared for, they want to be included, they want to feel not just special, but loved. And that's where we come to the third church, the extending church. And the extending church, from the minute you walk in until the minute you leave, you feel included, you feel welcomed, you feel accepted, and you feel loved. And it's not that you have to go up to people, but from the minute you walk in, people embrace you, people welcome you, people care for you. Not because they have an agenda, not because they need anything. They don't look at what you believe and how you believe it and how you look and what your actions may be. They just care about you because you know why? You are made in God's image. You are special. You are unique to Him. And they recognize it. Why? Because they have recognized their own purpose, their own identity. They are comfortable in their own skin. And churches like this are winsome. And you know what? I don't think a lot of people are leaving the extending church. I think in many cases people are looking for the extending church. So I ask you right now, and I ask you to consider, you know, where am I? Am I at an exclusive church? Am I at an inclusive church? Or am I at an extending church? And then sit down with your pastors or your leaders and say, and if you are a pastor and a leader, sit down and go, how can we become an extending church? Because that's the church of God. That's the church that will make a difference and an impact in this culture. I want to thank you for engaging this blog. I thank you for taking the time. I hope this encouraged you. We have a couple resources for you if you want to check them out. The first one is our website at www.rethinkerbblog.wordpress.com, where you can learn a lot about who we are. You can read a lot of our articles, and you can definitely engage and interact with us there. And then we have a couple books for you. They're on Amazon. One is called Parables and Parallels. The other one's called Mission. Both books also one looks at the biblical worldview, the other looks at the kingdom from a strategic Christian perspective. I encourage you to pick up both of those. So again, we really appreciate you taking the time to come here. And just remember, inside, outside the church, wherever you happen to be, always live inspired.